Hey, welcome on in, guys. Tobin here with you, and thanks for checking out the channel. Hope everybody's doing fantastic out there, and everybody is ready for a wonderful New Year's Eve. As man, it's been a crazy 2024 for me. A lot of things this year thrown our way, and in a lot of ways, blessed that it's the end of the new year, and in a lot of ways ready to put the year behind me. But one thing I am thankful for is the support you guys have shown the channel. I appreciate you guys tuning in left and right, and to the radio show, to the podcast, to the interviews. The support and love has been unbelievable. It's been unbelievable, and I can't tell you how much it means to me anytime anybody says that they watch the page or enjoy the page or don't enjoy the page but do check out the page. And the same thing goes for the radio show with me and Leroy and all the Leroy. I get all over town, so it means the world to me. Happy New Year to everybody out there. What is going to be interesting is what is 2025 going to be like for your Miami Dolphins, because yesterday Mike McDaniel spoke to the media about Tua Tagovailoa's health status, and you can never quite know how someone is going to be, especially coaches, because I'll start off here. Coaches lie. They lie all the time. They lie to the media all the time. Hell, they lied last week. They lied last week saying that the kid, that the quarterback was going to play. But I will say, I don't love all the stuff that I'm hearing when it comes to Tua's injury. None of us here are doctors. None of us here can really know where he's at with this type of thing. But when you hear the terms that are getting thrown out there with this injury, it's tough not to feel like the guy is definitely at risk to play against the Jets. But then when you hear things like what the coach is saying yesterday, and he's saying like, well, one, Tua's body isn't responding the way that we hoped. That's always like, all right. Two, that he's at risk for further damage. Three, wouldn't it have been safe at all to put him out on the field. And, just that also for Snoop Huntley is going to be taking more snaps and reps in practice this week for the Dolphins at quarterback. None of that feels in the area that Tua Tagovailoa is going to be playing quarterback for the Miami Dolphins against the New York Jets come Week 18 at 4:25. None of what the coach said yesterday would lead you to believe that. Will things be different on Wednesday? Will Tua speak to the media? Will Tua, will he practice at all? Like, will he get a DN? Will he get a did not practice? I guess we're going to get a lot of answers when that first injury report hits for the Miami Dolphins. But yeah, man, I mean, him yesterday basically going out there and painting it in a picture that Tua just doesn't seem like he's close, right? It was really when he was like, oh, we don't know what the timeline is. We didn't know we're in this. He used the term gray area. I was like, gray area? This is where we're at right now? And it's unbelievably disheartening to be at this spot with the Dolphins QB yet again at another end of the season, and you're not going to have him full strength or even at any strength in the moments that you need him. And this is now twice under the Mike McDaniel era. And it's interesting because you paint the picture of first year with Mike McDaniel and second year with Mike and this year with Mike McDaniel. They're eerily similar in that you have the chance to finish 9-8. You're going to have to do it probably with a backup quarterback, and maybe even the playoff game, which will be against Buffalo if somehow the Dolphins can make it. And it just feels different because the Dolphins did show some resolve here. They were able to get to the playoffs after basically having a season dead in the water. It would show tremendous guts. There's no doubt about that. But then you're also you're also going to be on a field against the Bills team. Let's just say the Dolphins make it with Snoop Huntley, and let's say they have to play. You're going to be on a field potentially with the reigning division champs who have destroyed you basically every time you played them, or have handled you every time you've played them outside of one ending where Ken Dorsey broke a a coach's box. He's no longer there. You have Josh Allen reigning, looking like he's going to get handed over the MVP trophy in a year where everybody thought he was going to be taking a step back. And I just, it's tough to look at it. It's going to be tough to look at this season for the Miami Dolphins and all the expectations and all the hope that they had, and also paint that with, and you also didn't get to see Tua down the stretch again. You didn't get to see what he was able to do. He had his game against San Francisco was tremendous. Which was off of arguably his worst game of the season, worse than the game that he got concussed in. So he bounced back in a big way. But you also have to look at it from the standpoint of, man, it was bad enough that you have the concussion thing to always be an anvil looming over the season, right? Like that it could always at any point just be like, bang, this is where you're at. But then on top of it now, you have this hip injury, which they say is a different location, but it is the same hip that he had. It is the same issue that he had in college. And once again, it's like these out-of-the-pocket plays. Like his body just can't seem like it holds up. And so for everybody who was a skeptic of paying him, I'm sure you're standing here on I Told You So Mountain and looking quite right. But it is also, as a Dolphins fan, whether you wanted him to be paid or not paid, it is quite depressing because you're sitting here with the unanswered question still of, can he be the guy that leads you? Can he rally the cavalry? Because he's probably not going to be able to play. And this isn't a question of Tua. I don't think this, I'm not one of these people that deems Tua soft. I think if anything, people say you're a Tua homer. You don't call it like it is a Tua. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's true. I think based on the times that I have called him out this year and how many people who thought I was blindly supporting Tua, that I know what that wrath can be like from the Tua fans and not necessarily the Dolphins fans, but I think it's also one of these things that's a little silly because it's like you're all supposed to be rooting for the same team and you're all supposed to be rooting for the same success. And no objective Tua or Dolphin fan can look at this and say it's anything but a disappointing situation. Maybe you don't think it's a surprising one if you've been as Tua skeptic this whole time. But it is depressing that you're just like, man, again at the end of the season, he's not there to finish things out. And especially if, if you were to go into Buffalo, of course, if you have Tua, you're like, all right, at least live. Like you got your starting quarterback. Snoop, who was tremendous this last game. This isn't a disparagement of Snoop Huntley. He was awesome. He was great. Especially comparing it to where the Dolphins were the last time they had to go through the carousel of Skylar Thompson and Snoop and Tim Boyle and all that. Night and day difference with how much better that he was. But we do have to take it out in the big focus of, hey, they were taking on the Cleveland Browns and they suck. And they're about to take on the New York Jets. I don't know what we're going to get from the New York Jets because the Jets, they played the Dolphins pretty tough last time around. Aaron Rodgers, best game of the season that he had. But it is the last week. He pulled himself out of a game last week. There's infighting. They're interviewing Rex Ryan. Who knows what the Jets are going to bring to the table this game? I would expect the Dolphins to win that game with Tua for sure, and with Snoop Huntley, I think they can win that game. But what happens when you get into a game against a playoff team? Now, the rat bastard will say, hey, Tua against a good team on the road, what do you think is going to happen, Tobin? Potentially in cold weather. Fair. But you can't sit here. No, not even the most ardent Tua hater could sit here and say, even if you're a Dolphins fan, you can't sit here and say that you'd rather have Huntley start that playoff game over Tua. I cannot. I couldn't believe. I'm sure like there's real people who are anti-Tua that would feel that way, and that's fine. Whatever. They got to stay in the lane of their take. But any sensible person would, of course, want Tua. But I got to be honest with you. After listening to Mike McDaniel speak about him, and also knowing how Mike is, like this is another thing, right? Mike is not John Voight in Varsity Blues. He is not, going to be out here trying to get guys to play through anything. He's not turning a blind eye, and if anything, I think anybody would say he's overly cautious when it comes to his players. And especially particularly this player. This is a player that he's got love for. This is the player that got him his job. This is the player that he's really built all his good karma with, has been the rebuilding of Tua. So it's hard for me to believe he's going to put that guy in harm's way or let Tua put himself in harm's way, because I don't think Tua's the only reason I think Tua is probably doubtful is he was hoping for some kind of body miracle, apparently, of what was going on. But when I hear things like his body didn't adapt, it's a gray area, he would be in harm's way, he could make it worse, but surgery's not on the table. Okay, so then it feels like it's a rest thing because his hip is so banged up, he can't move, he can't get the kind of velocity on his throws that he needs to, or he can't withstand the punishment of a line that maybe we'll have Teron Armstead, maybe won't. I mean, we just saw last week with Patrick Paul, right? Like, young fella's got some growth. Now, I understand it. It's Myles Garrett. That guy is very strong. Like, I think I saw on his grades how bad his grades were from last week, and I thought there should be an asterisk here for this giant being like, but had to go against a monster. And I'm sure has never felt that lack of strength in his life, because at that size, how often could you possibly feel like anybody can move me however I want to be moved? It's got to be a weird feeling for Patrick Paul in that situation. But from my standpoint, hearing everything Mike said and all the comments, I was just like, this doesn't sound good. This doesn't sound good, and it doesn't sound like a guy who he's gonna be gung-ho to put back on the football field. Now, maybe the Dolphins' hope is we're taking on two terrible teams. We know we can beat these teams with Snoop Huntley. Let's go win these games. Give Tua 2 weeks of rest. If the playoffs happen, the playoffs happen. Maybe that's the way they go. It's kind of how they've gone. That's how they went with the Bradley Chubb thing, right? Like if the Dolphins knew they were in the playoffs, rather than crossing their fingers to get to the playoffs, would Bradley Chubb be playing? Probably, right? But like he even said this about Jalen Waddle, right? Like he said this about Jalen Waddle that was interesting, where he said one of the reasons Jalen Waddle didn't play in Cleveland was because of Cleveland's field. Cleveland, plays with an artificial field, and then Cleveland also bad field conditions, and they're like, because you saw Waddle was out there for warm-ups, he's like, there was a very good chance of re-aggravation. Mike McDaniel listens to his medical people, he listens to his sports science people, and I just don't think the odds of that by Sunday are going to sway towards Tua being able to go. And so now it's just in the hands of, can they win this game against the Jets? I think it's possible. And can they get the Chiefs, who kind of owe the Dolphins, but, what do they care? Bastards. Only when it's good for you, right? But it feels to him, it feels to me like they're getting set to hold him out again that he's not going to be ready. And what that means for his playoff, if the Dolphins do get the playoffs, I don't know, because it sounds like they are monitoring this thing day to day, and it could change. So everything I could say could be thrown out the window. Although he did say this week that he anticipates Snoop getting more reps, which already just was like, whew, sounds like Tua's not playing. But if he doesn't play in the playoffs again, it's impossible to not feel like, if the Dolphins even make the playoffs, but let's say they do. Let's say they win. Let's say the Broncos lose. And you get to that Buffalo game, and again, you're on the road, but you have a backup quarterback. How is that not going to feel like this? It's impossible not to have that feel like this unfulfilling end of the season, because it does feel like you go in there with a backup quarterback, you got no damn shot, right? That would be the Dolphins would be double-digit underdogs easy with a backup quarterback going into Buffalo. Hell, they might be with Tua, but none of what Mike McDaniel gave, I think, the Dolphin fan any peace with the status of QB1.